Hey guys, welcome back to the Unleashed podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Rieger, and today we're chatting with my good friend Craig Norton of Beyond the Known International. It's a ministry that is based in Costa Rica, and Craig has a unique way of doing things. He's the CEO, but he's able to run it remotely. He only goes down to Costa Rica about once a month or so, and he has a whole team of local Costa Ricans that run his ministry for him. Craig has a fascinating story of business, and he said he learned how to fail, and he took his systems and processes knowledge from business into the mission field. There are so many good moments and golden nuggets from this episode, guys. I took a lot of notes here. One thing I noticed in Craig's life is he has lived a life of radical obedience. When God has told him to move from one season to another, from one position to another, he literally left his business. He was in furniture, just like my wife and I were. He had a manufacturer's rep firm, and he left that to go into the church world. He became an executive pastor. That church had $15 million in debt. And through his business acumen, he was able to, with the help of the Lord, obviously, turn that around and make that into a thriving church. And then he left that and not knowing exactly what to do, but sensed that it was time and followed the Lord. And he spent 3 to 4 months just seeking the Lord. And I'm telling his testimony, but just meant so much to me because there's so many parallels in my personal life to what Craig has gone through. And he talked about how people are risk averse and how especially believers are risk averse, and how you've got to step out and do what God's called you to do. But Craig's built his ministry a different way. It wasn't that, hey, I'm the guy with all the answers here and I'm going to help make this community better. He came with a heart of service and literally asked these two questions to as many people in the community as he could. What is your greatest hope and dream? And what is stopping you from doing it? And he just listened. He set up so many coffee meetings and just first listened to what the needs of the community were and then figured out how to meet those needs. It's such a different way of going about things. And his ministry is successful as a result of it. He's built sustainable pathways by building trust. I would say how he's built his ministry is just through the power of relationships. That relational way of doing things, not the transactional way, has built his ministry. And he says he expands and leads with relationship. He expands the ministry based on the relationships that come in to his ministry. And this is something that also was so powerful. He said he nurtures the relationships so that they trust the gospel. Guys, it's such a powerful episode. This is one that I really feel like is very anointed. If you are looking for if you're starting a business, starting a ministry, you must listen to this because Craig essentially provides the blueprint that I believe is the right way to go about something. You go about listening to people first. What are the needs in that community that you're called to serve, whether it's in ministry or in business? And the Lord will give you ideas on how to do that. And Craig has been able to piece things together, piece different sectors of the society together to meet the needs of the community. It's so cool. You're going to love this episode. Here it is. Craig, welcome to Unleashed.
Hey Ryan, good to be here with you.
Thanks for doing this. We should have done this at the barbecue restaurant down the road. That would have been good.
Yeah, that would have been cool. I've done a podcast in a coffee shop that was
Have
pretty
you?
awesome. So
Yes.
yeah, a little coffee shop in Grapevine was really
Okay.
pretty cool. So good settings. But
Yes.
it's good to be here with you today. That's awesome.
Yes. I'm so glad to have you here, and I love what you're doing, and it's so unique. But we'll definitely get into what BTK is, Beyond the Known, and all the awesome stuff you're doing down in Costa Rica. But tell me your story. Every people's stories are so fascinating, and let me know. Let's let the listeners know who you are.
Sure, sure. Well, I can go back and really to my childhood and just take on a short journey of kind of how this all developed. But
Yeah.
I grew up in a very loving Christian family, but I didn't have um, my dad was active in my life, but not
Hmm.
like every ball game, every Boy Scout trip, every church youth group trip. He wasn't. He was working. He was an accountant that supported our family. So I didn't grow up fatherless, but other men played a tremendous influence in my life. And
Mm.
so um, early on in my life, I started on this leadership journey, learning from other men in the Boy Scouts, and really began to shape how I interacted with people, how
Mm.
I began to learn to serve other people. It started as a young kid, and so I journeyed all through scouting, all through my high school and college days. Worked for the Boy Scouts, um, went to college, continued to do that and to serve, and really just I began to be shaped about my real care and
Mm-hmm.
my passion for people. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and how that I could help people. And so um, as I began to do that, you go to work and you begin to shape your life. And I found myself in a sales and sales management career path. And I think I loved it because I was able to interact with people on a daily basis. I wasn't stuck in an office, stuck behind a desk. I was out and about. And so um, had a successful sales career in sales management, marketing, product launch type company,
Mm-hmm.
and it was in early 2000 that I launched a business down in South Louisiana, and we um, we opened a children's furniture store just to
Mm-hmm.
you know it's where I was. We had been away from Louisiana for many
Mm-hmm.
years, and so we opened this store, and we opened on a Saturday, and 3 days later, 9/11 happened.
Oh my
And
gosh.
you
Wow.
can imagine launching a business in the middle of that dynamic, right? We went from
Mm-hmm.
a high of a grand opening to
Yes.
nobody showed up on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Um, and so for 3 years, we basically chased the rabbit around the tree, trying to make it work in an
Mm-hmm.
environment where loans were very hard to come by because of
Mm-hmm.
the crashes. And so we ended up for 3 years just living kind of hand to mouth as a cash business, and finally wrapped that up. And so one of the things that I had to learn how to do early in my business career was learn how to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I
Yeah.
wasn't a humble person. I was a proud person. I didn't know that I had that issue, but I had to learn how to fail. And so we wrapped up our business. We took care of our customers. We did things in the best way that we could, but we still had to go through a corporate bankruptcy because of a commercial lease.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did that. And that's not one of those things that you go, gosh, this was exciting. It was terrible.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but what I didn't know at the time was God was shaping me for
Mm-hmm.
future things that He had for me.
Mm-hmm.
Through my struggles, I was learning how to he was preparing me for greater things. And so we successfully finished that. And I ended up being hired on by some of my biggest manufacturers as a manufacturer's rep. And so I was able to start a
Mm-hmm.
manufacturer's rep firm
Mm-hmm.
coming out of this business loss.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up having 12 factories from around the world that we brought product into the States for,
That's awesome.
and
It was furniture
marketing.
products.
Yeah, it was children's baby furniture. So
Oh,
we
that's
carried
awesome.
everything for kids
Wow.
that was not food or clothing. So
Yeah.
every category. So we would go into
Mm-hmm.
mass merchants, we would go into independent retailers, mom and
Mm-hmm.
pop shops, and we could
Yeah.
fill every category in the store.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm sorry, I
You
guess
can,
my phone is
you can, that's fine. I don't even hear it. It's all good.
okay, good. Um,
And if you need to
uh,
take a call, it's no
I,
big deal. We can always
I
edit anything out.
I don't. I had tried to isolate things where they wouldn't ring, but I guess
Right?
text messages
No,
are still coming through.
all
So I was
good.
distracted. Sorry.
No good. No big
Um,
deal.
so I was able to start this manufacturer's rep firm in 2004, and
Mm.
man, we had great success. I was able to put some employees on the road, and we were covering 13 states.
Wow.
Um, Built a sales and marketing firm that I mean we had some really great success, and I was able to service mass merchants. My
Hmm.
largest merchant was the Army Air Force Exchange Service, right? And so I
Wow.
was able to sell product into their system here in their Dallas offices, but affect 138 Army bases around the world. And so um, I was just really blessed and fortunate to come out of a struggling time into a thriving time.
Yes.
Um, but as we did that, coming into 2009, 2010, I guess I just got bored, Ryan.
Hmm.
And I don't mean that in a bad way. We were working hard, we were having success, but
Hmm.
I was taking care of customers here locally. My team was out on the road. I wasn't traveling as much. Um, and I found myself at the local church volunteering a lot more.
Hmm.
Um, and there was a day that the pastor's wife, we were working on a project, and she said, "Man, you really need to talk to my husband." I was like, "What?" She goes, "There's just something different about your leadership." Well, I didn't know all of this that had been poured into me as a young child, all the way through college, through failing in a business, through building a new business.
Hmm.
But they asked me to come to work for the church to help to do a turnaround project on the local church.
Hmm.
And so I wrapped my business up. I walked away from a successful business to go to work in 2010 for a local church as an executive pastor to help build systems and help the church restructure, transform, get out of debt,
Hmm.
and launch in a successful way. And so that's what I did. I'd never been to seminary, never been in any kind of pastoral training. I had just been a Christian serving in the local church,
Hmm.
and my business skills were something the church needed. So I stepped into that calling.
Wow.
Um, and so we did that. And little did I know that we would walk through about $15 million worth of debt, having to get out of that.
Wow.
And I didn't know that everything God had taught me in wrapping up a business that had not succeeded would need to be used to serve the local church.
Wow.
How to
Yeah.
how to how to negotiate with people you owe money to, how to be transparent in the ways that you solve financial issues. How do you grow an organization in unhealthy spots? And so
Mm.
so we did it. And we were able to help
Mm.
lead that church out of some financial hardships and
Mhm.
restructure and get in a new leadership dynamic. And
Wow.
then in 2018, the Lord called me out of that. Was finished with that journey. I had really completed what He had asked me to go there to do, and so then I was kind of in search, and that's when He called me into full time mission work, and it was
Mm.
I had been journeying, preparing places for people to worship and to serve in the local church, but it needed to be greater than that. And
Mhm.
so the Lord asked me to take my thought process, my way of thinking through things, the way of developing systems and processes
Mhm.
into the mission field to do something different to impact the kingdom. So that's kind of
Wow.
a nickel tour of the whole story,
So
how it all
good.
ties together, basis of leadership, experience, and really just practical ways of thinking about
Mm.
life, but business and ministry as well.
Wow.
Just really applying a clear thought process to those things.
When you left the manufacturing rep firm, did you sell it or just say bye bye and give it to somebody else?
I walked away. Right, the
Uh-huh.
Lord the
Uh-huh.
Lord was very clear that if I was going to go all in and follow Him in ministry, I couldn't take any of that with me, and
Mm.
so I actually let it go to my employees.
Yeah.
And
Is that still
so
going today, that business?
you there's elements of it that are.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they've
Yeah.
spun off and done different things, but
Yeah.
um, when that final commission check came in, that was it for me.
Mm.
And they started and they immediately took over, and so
Wow.
um, that was a point in my life where I had never worked for a salary in my life. Right, I'd
Yeah.
always been 100% commission employee since the time I left
Mhm.
college, and so um, I was in this mindset that if I didn't show up and go to work every day, I had no chance of making a living. Right, so
Yes.
I was out there hustling, and to
Yeah.
come into a ministry role where there's a salary and insurance and all the things that go with it, it's completely different, and it was a
Yes.
foreign mindset because I started encountering people who they just kind of showed up and went through the motions, and I didn't know how to do that
Mm.
because I had to go make my next opportunity. Right, I
Yes.
had to go hunt and gather, and I had to tell my story every day in the sales world, and
Yeah.
um, it was just different in the church world.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh. Was it a big, I mean, imagine when tell me about that process of going from manufacturing rep firm, business. And by the way, we were in the furniture business. When I moved to Texas
Right.
in 2008, we started selling well, my wife and mother-in-law had already started selling furniture on Craigslist. And I moved here and being entrepreneurial, I saw that opportunity and the Lord blessed it. We had a store for a year in Colleyville, hated it because we were stuck to the store. But I was driving furniture all over the Metroplex, and we picked
That's
up, you'll
right.
know these names. I picked up furniture like Coaster and
Yeah.
Acme in the Arlington area. We also had accounts. I had an account with Donco, which was kids
Yeah.
furniture on the
Yeah.
south side of Fort Worth. So I literally could go there and pick it up and deliver it, or we would ship it all over the country. But that's fascinating. You were in the kids
Yeah.
furniture. All right, my question was,
Absolutely.
but that process of like you knew God was leading you out because people that are in transition that can be exciting and scary all at the same time. What were the feelings surrounding that? Was it like, yes, God, I'm excited and this is awesome, or was it like, are you sure, Lord, is this what you really want me to
Yeah.
do?
Um, Having lost a business in 2004 and walked through a place where I was really trying to do it and fix it on my own, I
Mm,
had discovered this new level of obedience that had to be
mm,
present in my life.
yeah.
Um, and so it was very clear to me
Hmm.
that either I was going to be obedient or I wasn't. There was no way to walk down the middle of this and hope it worked out or try to figure it out. There had to be a sever of the past and a
Yeah.
clear step into the future. And
Mm,
for me, that was strictly me being radically obedient to God.
yeah.
He said, "Come do this for the
Mm,
kingdom."
mm.
And I could either say, "No, I've got a better plan for myself, Lord," or "Okay, I'm going to go do it."
Yes. Yes.
And fortunately, through my process of being discipled in life, I was obedient.
Mm,
I found that pathway,
yes.
and so it's very clear. It was
Yeah.
not hard for me.
Yeah.
It was completely different, right? The environments I stepped into, but the step of clarity with the Lord was not
Mm,
confusing at all.
that's good. What about your step from the church into beyond the known and going into full-time
Um,
mission?
it was once again complete obedience,
Yeah.
but completely different.
Yeah.
Um, in that this wasn't anything that we could see coming.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
we were all in. We were transitioning a church to a new location, had just finished a giant real estate deal to eliminate the debt. We were launching a new campus in the middle of a construction process.
mm,
Um,
mm,
and then within about a 2 week period, I resigned.
mm.
It just became clear that I was not in the right spot anymore.
Yeah.
And the difference is, I didn't resign to go to somewhere new. I
Mm,
resigned to be obedient that I needed to leave where I was.
yes.
Um, and so it took several months to really discover
Mm,
what I
mm.
what I was supposed to do. I remember, and I have it just sitting right here on my desk. I had this journal,
Yeah.
and I just pulled it out, and so January 3rd, 2019. So I resigned from the church this first part of December, first week of December 2018,
Hmm.
right? And so just a month of I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know, my wife and family going, "This is a little crazy. What are we doing?"
Mm,
But I wrote this down on January 3rd after just kind of spending the holidays with the family. I wrote this down that I would have a life statement that Craig Norton would. I was to live and lead a life where my investment in others makes disciples who makes disciples.
mm,
And the Lord gave me a word on that day, January 3rd, that my word was to follow, right?
mm,
Matthew 4:18 and 20, come follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. Leave your life as you know it and follow me. And so that's what the Lord was asking me to do.
mm.
And I didn't know where that was going, right? I had
Yeah.
no idea, but I knew that if I was going to be obedient, I just had to go. And
Mm,
so I spent the next 3 or 4 months just journaling, reading, studying scripture, and really became clear to me. And this whole vision for Beyond the Known International began to come together. And it was based on investing my life in other people to
Yeah.
make a difference for the kingdom.
Yes. Wow. Wow. Some of your story mirrors with mine. I think about the person who's, well, give me an idea of when you say it became clear to you that you were supposed to leave the church. What were just, if, what were some of those feelings? And
Yeah,
I understand
sure.
that you feel like the grace lifts off, or there's just
Mm,
not right anymore. But what are some of the feelings that, that are, if somebody's feeling this, it could give them a clue that maybe God's leading them a different direction?
I believe that God has designed us all very unique, um, and I believe that we all operate in a couple of different areas. Right, we're either
Mhm.
risk averse or
Yeah.
we're open to risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
In sales, I never knew where the next thing was coming from, so I was always in the midst of risk. Right, I could drive across the country, call on a client, and not get anything out of it, and
Yeah.
drive back. I mean, it was a risk I took every time I stepped into a business relationship.
Yes.
Um, so I approached my work at the church that way. But what I found was most people, I'm talking church members, I'm talking church staff members, um,
Mhm.
pastoral staff, employees, man, they're risk averse, right?
Mhm.
They want the pathway that brings the least challenge.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't believe that's how God intends to use us. He's created us
Mhm.
for himself and to trust him. And
Yes.
that means it's a risk, right? If I go there, if I do this, if God doesn't show up, I'm going to fail. If I do it in my own power, I'm going to fail. And
Yes.
so that's a risk. And so there's a certain comfort level, and it happens not only in the church, but it happens in our corporate lives and in places where we become so comfortable and so content that we're not risking anything. We
Yeah.
show up, go through the motions,
Yes.
we we step into our role every day, and we just become very machine like in
Yeah.
producing X, Y, and Z. But God's made us for more, and
Hmm.
we should be challenged every day for something for his kingdom.
Yes.
And so I was at a point where I really felt like there was more.
Yeah.
And I wasn't taking a risk for the gospel. I
Yeah.
was showing up to a job. I was showing up to a process. It was I was able to check the box. Right, there was
Yeah.
nothing challenging my faith in the middle of the church. Right, and unfortunately, I think that's true for many church people. We get so comfortable where we are that
Mm-hmm.
we forget what we're really called to.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So good.
and so it was clear that I had to leave because God was telling me I needed to take a bigger risk.
Yeah. Wow. Do you feel like there's probably a lot of people that are sitting in comfortable jobs that know they're made for more, but just don't have the guts to explore that and jump
You
off,
know,
get out of the
you know
boat?
what? Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's maybe a little different context about how I think about it.
Mm.
Right, we're called as followers of Christ to be a disciple and make disciples. Right,
Hmm.
we never arrive. There's at no point in our lives where we are a full made disciple until our life is over. We
Right.
can always be refined, we can always grow. And if we choose to stop growing, if we choose to stop being discipled,
Hmm.
then we become stale. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people who are stuck in their careers, stuck in their place, it's it may very well be that's where they're called to be, but
Hmm.
God still wants them to grow beyond that, right? There's influence that you carry with you that you need to express, and when we stop, we
Hmm.
begin to sit in a spot that for me is just it can't exist, right? We're either there's no point of neutrality with the
Yeah.
gospel. We're
Hmm.
either moving the kingdom forward,
Yeah.
or our indifference makes us move it the wrong
Yeah.
direction,
That's so
right?
good.
There's no neutral moment. And so I think people who would consider themselves stuck or just living out, they really need to evaluate this neutrality that they find themselves in, this indifference that they find themselves in, because we should wake up every day challenged with, how can I expand the kingdom of God
Yes.
in my sphere of influence?
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't have to go be a preacher. I don't have to go be an evangelist. I don't have
Right.
to go be a missionary.
Mm.
I have to go be who God called me to be
Mm-hmm.
and make a difference for his kingdom
Yeah.
in my next step. And a lot of times we just sit still and
Mm.
we tend to fall off the other side, which is this indifference, this place where we're actually not moving the gospel forward at all.
Yes.
We're pulling away from it.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. Wow. Well, tell me about Beyond the Known, how you got into that. I love that you said you spent 3 to 4 months seeking the Lord and he started to make it clear to you what you're supposed to
Yeah.
be doing. And
So I had early January 2027 or 2019, I was really trying to figure it out, right? And I mean, when you walk away from 50% of your household income, you walk away with no security. You're
yeah.
just like, I'm out, I'm done. Um, you you work hard to try to figure those things out, right? So,
Mm.
my wife is, where are we sending the resume? What are we doing? And I'm like, I have nothing, right? I can't go and apply for an executive pastor job because to me, you're asked to do that to support someone else's vision. You don't apply to do that. So I'm like, nobody's asking me to do that.
Mhm.
Can I go to work for other organizations? And I just had no peace about
Yeah.
just applying for jobs.
Yeah.
It was not clear. I couldn't do it. And so I found myself,
Yeah.
I'd gone on this trip to Port-au-Prince, Haiti, thinking that I would work for um, or work with a mission organization, doing some fundraising, some development. And it was great. I was very intrigued by it. That's what shaped a little bit more about this international mission thing. But
Mhm.
as I was leaving Haiti, the Lord was very clear. It was like, this is not for you. This is not what I have for you. Even though I had spent this week there and I could see, man, these opportunities, and you get excited about the things that are in front of you. He's like, this isn't it, Craig.
Mm.
And so in my fleshly sarcasm, I said, okay, Lord, then what is it? And very clearly he said, well, you should just read my scripture. So there, as I wait to board my flight back to Miami, I pulled my Bible out and took me to 2 Corinthians 4:18, where the scripture says, do not focus on things that are seen because they're temporary, but focus on things that are unseen because they're eternal.
Mm.
So, Craig, if you're going to truly do what I want you to do, you can't understand it. You have to go beyond what you can see
Yeah.
to where if I don't show up, you'll fail. So that's where Beyond the Known
Yes.
came from reading scripture in the airport in Port-au-Prince. Um, and so then I just started to evaluate, okay, Lord, well, then what is it? And I had some long relationships down in Costa Rica just from doing short-term trips and doing disaster relief, that I
Mm.
just went and I sat with one of the pastors that's very good friends of mine.
Mhm. You went
And
to Costa Rica?
I went to Costa
Yeah.
Rica.
See, Ryan, I want to point out what you just did right there because a lot of people would be like, okay, God, you're telling me to do something I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to sit here until you tell me what to do. But I love how because you're wired the same way. It's like, let's start exploring. God cannot direct a parked car. So let's start making some
Yeah,
connections, exploring, and then like following that piece. But okay, go ahead. I don't want to enter.
yeah. So I knew I needed biblical counsel, right? I needed someone who could speak into my life. And so I
Yeah.
went to a friend who's a pastor of a church.
Yeah.
And I just started sharing what God had put on my heart, what I had been journaling, you know, page after page of just these notes. And we began to talk, and he was like, Craig, that's the same thing that's on my heart. And so for a week, we just prayed. And so we came to the end. And this was actually in March of that year. And March 2019, and we just came to the end, and I'm like, okay, well, this is something we've got to do together, right? And his vision was this. He said, in Costa Rica, there's this mountain, this volcano that our city is located on, and he said, look, he said, I can see little fires burning out through the distance, and he says it's kingdom expressions. And I was like, okay, is it all church plants? Am I supposed to go be a church planter? And it wasn't, right? I mean, it was very clear that this could be a Bible study, a feeding center. It just had to be a gospel expression. And so it wasn't necessarily a church, but it could be just a couple of people who are pressing. And so very intrigued by that. And we found this unity, this unification together on how to just impact this region, that it would happen in a different way than just the local church, not
Yes.
not away from the local church, just
Sure.
the expression might look different. And so we finished that week up, and he's like, well, what's next? I'm like, well, I'll come back next month and we'll just do it again. So I came home and I told my wife, hey, I'm going back to Costa Rica. And she's like, you don't have a job? We don't have any money. I'm like, I have one more flight coupon left. I'm going back. And so we went back the next week and
Wow.
or the next month. And I was just like, hey, let's just make some appointments and start talking to people.
Yeah.
And so just like in sales, right? When you go out and prospect, you never know what you're walking into.
Right.
So I had a translator and I just said, hey, make an appointment with a government official, an educator, some other pastors. And so we just went around and I just said, look, I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. So let me ask you about you, right? And so I began to ask these questions. What's your greatest hope and dream? And what's keeping you from getting there? And I would just stop. And we would begin to listen to them. And so everything that we do today came out of about 40 meetings that we had where we asked those two questions, and the people of this region began to tell us how to serve them, how to take care of stuff. And so our mission and vision, everything we do today came out of those meetings. And what rose to the top, because we expanded this from just going to somebody's office to we started hosting community gatherings, and we'd have 40 people in the room and we'd cover the walls in paper and ask those questions, and people would begin to just give us their dream and their barrier. And what we found was that people were incredibly concerned about food security, about poverty. Where was their next meal going to come from? They were concerned about the quality of education their kids were getting, and they were concerned about jobs. And so as we walked through that, God really began to shape in me what our organization was supposed to be. I didn't even know it was supposed to be an organization at that point. Yeah. But what he gave me, that we were through the power of relationships supposed to design community support systems to eradicate local poverty, expand access to education, and stimulate economic development and job growth. So today that actually reads like this: Beyond the Known International exists to develop and support relational training solutions that empower community leaders to eradicate poverty, expand access to education, stimulate economic development and job growth. Very, very business-like. Yeah. But as I continue to unpack it, the pastor's like, well, Craig, that sounds good, but it doesn't sound like the church. And I said, well, no, it's exactly the church, right? It's the Great Commission and the Great Commandment. We're supposed to make disciples, yes, and replicate ourselves, and we're supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves. And so if we develop these relationships, if we build these systems and we train people, we're making a disciple. And then if we are able to help with poverty and education and jobs, that's just the compassion ministries of Christ. That's how he began to go out and serve people. Yeah. It's how he took the bowl and towel and bent down and washed their feet to give them that example. And so our very corporate sounding mission vision statement actually is very biblical. It's the Great Commission and the Great Commandment. That's what we do.
That's so good. I would also say, like, if somebody want to start a business, that's not a bad way to start it. Just go talk to who you think your customers are going to be, and just ask them those questions. They'll tell you exactly what they need. It's brilliant.
Talk to your competitors. Yeah. Right? They know what they're failing at. They know what they're not succeeding at.
Yeah.
Don't look. There's nothing unique, right? There's no really new ideas that are there, right? We gain from other people, we learn from other people's experiences, but the only way that this manifests itself out in our lives is if we take what God gifted us with and we put that into practice. Yeah. That's not a duplication of somebody else. That's our giftedness. We're all wired unique. We're all individual people. And if we take that giftedness, and express it for his kingdom, then it'll succeed because that's what he's
Yes,
created us to do.
that's so good. Wow. Your two questions, I repeat them often to people. I got it
Yeah,
written in my Trello board. It was so impactful to me when you were up at Eli's last event in February and spoke. And that's the one thing I remember about that event. The one speaker. I mean, there's lots of good speakers there,
sure.
and people now that I know and are friends of mine, but that just those two words, there's two questions were just went right to my heart. And like that's how you approach every relationship because I'm like you. I want to help people and I want to help people start businesses, and those are great questions to ask and
Yeah,
help them.
so many times we approach solutions from a programmatic standpoint, right?
Mm,
I learned that in business. I would have sales managers, and it was predominantly in the car seat industry and stroller industry, right? And so you came to launch time, and we've R&D would develop all these new products,
mhm,
and they would come and they try. National sales managers come and travel with you, and you're going from store to store, and they're like, "Hey, get the samples, get the catalog, let's go show this new product." And I'd be like, "No, we're not going to do that." I'm like, "What are you talking about? We're not going to do that." I'm like, "No, well, I just have to go take care of my customer." And so I had tremendous sales. We had a great success. I had no issue getting product placement, but I would go into these appointments and
mm,
I would ask about their family. I would ask about how they're doing personally, right? And I would never go in with the intent to sell them something. I did not want my relationships to be transactional.
oh, so
It had to be relational. And so as I took care of my customers, I cared for their families, I nurtured their businesses.
mm,
The product was secondary, right? So many times in businesses, we lead with our product, we lead with our widget,
mm,
and we need to lead with our relationship. And so, what happened for me and what I learned is that all of my sales goals were fulfilled because people trusted me. And so, when I would go take care of them, inevitably, I would get a call and a fax the next week, and it would say, "Craig, I have 12 linear feet of space available. Hey, just put whatever you want in there." Right. And so they trusted me. They trusted my
yes,
opinion.
yeah,
And so the new products always got placed, but it was because of trust. It
that's
wasn't
so
because
good.
of any feature on the
Yeah,
product. It
yeah,
wasn't because of any sales volume discount they got. It
hmm,
was because they believed I would do the best for them and
hmm,
I had their best interest at heart.
wow,
And a lot of times I think when we approach people with the gospel, we use the gospel as a hammer.
mm,
And a lot of people aren't excited about that. And the gospel can transcend anything. It's all powerful. The Lord is,
mhm,
um, but but our role as disciple makers
mhm,
is to nurture a relationship so that they trust the gospel.
yeah,
Because if we're living the gospel
yes,
and we approach it as a hammer, it's going to be brutal. But
yeah,
if we were approach it with love and through this power of relationship, just as Christ nurtures us as we develop relationship, then the gospel will transcend that. The
hmm,
results will be highly impactful. And
yes,
so I believe we should preach at all times.
hmm,
I do. There's no doubt about it. But not all of us are called to be evangelists.
right,
We're not all gifted speakers who need to be on a pulpit, but all of us are called to be disciple makers. And
yes,
so that is the the joining together, the relational piece of our lives that we have to learn to embrace. And that
mm,
happens whether you're on a little league sports team coaching kids and
mm,
consoling parents as parents when their kids don't get to play, or
yeah,
you're in the marketplace
mm,
driving high volumes of deals all around the world. It's
mm,
all the same. Everything we do rises and falls on relationship.
yes.
100%
Oh,
rises and falls on relationships.
wow. Oh my gosh. I'm getting these ideas that I had when we were hanging out at Joe T. Garcia's. We'll save that offline. But
We
tell
we
me
need
about
to we need to do that some more.
let's talk some.
Some
Yeah, we go out and I'll take you for lunch again.
There you
Let
go.
tell me about some of the cool stories. Like I love how you were,
Yeah,
what BTK is doing and how you were solving the food problem by partnering with a school. It also allows the kids to get practice being a butcher, and it's just not like,
yeah, yeah.
hey, we're just gonna give food away. No, like you're like bringing in the whole community to solve this problem.
So, so what I understand and what I things that frustrate. First, I love the local church. I love people who go on missional journeys. So I don't want you to take this as that I don't love that. God has just wired me with a way to do this differently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't believe that I'm supposed to live in Costa Rica or in any country where I am going to do my work. The work that needs to be done is for locals. It's for indigenous people. It's for the people group that God has put in that community.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I come in and I'm the hero and everything revolves around me, they don't grow.
Mm-hmm.
And so I need to be the person on the outside that's encouraging, discipling them into their destiny.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so when I step into a community, I can't view the community as only the local church or only the business community or only the educational community. Community, geographic territory
Mm-hmm.
is inclusive of all things that are in it,
Mm-hmm.
all spheres of influence that reside in that area:
Yeah.
media, social, church, education,
Mm-hmm.
business, whatever they all are part of that.
Yeah.
And so if I am going to take a holistic view of changing the world with the gospel, then I cannot be absent from any of those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So when I step into a community, it's the totality of it. And
Yeah.
so we do take a holistic view.
Yeah.
Um, we believe that if we root this change agent in the community, then we can build sustainable pathways out
Mm-hmm.
through those different spheres of influence. And that's all done by building trust. And so when we go into a community and we ask those two questions, the intent is not to deliver a program. The intent is to build trust.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the other side of that trust, I then have to discover what they're good at. So if I went into a community and wanted to start a youth sports program because that's a program that I'm gifted in, but no one there is interested in sports and no one has the gift of coaching sports, we would have a difficult time developing a youth sports program.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to go in and find out what people's passions are, what they care about to
Yes.
be able to apply this. And so what we have found is that the core to every community is the family.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can start doing things that help local leaders impact the family,
Mm-hmm.
then we have a chance to speak to the total community. And so with that, with the understanding that poverty, education, and economics are all there, all three of those impact the family. So we start out in a community asking those questions, but we begin to meet felt needs with food distribution, whether it's a feeding center for kids, right? We drive down to find the place that needs to be applied, and we
Mm-hmm.
start building trust. We start building repetitions so that people know we're true to our word and we're going to execute on what we said we were going to execute on. So
Mm-hmm.
feeding is where it starts. The second one is generally we find great success in pregnancy ministry. Pregnancy ministry is not something that was on our list to start out, but it is something that um, that we fell into kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And what we realize is when you don't think you have an issue with crisis pregnancy in your community where everything looks good all around you as well, put a free pregnancy test sign on your building and watch the people line up who need help. It's
Mm-hmm.
all over the place. And so we did that. And so today we have 4 pregnancy centers where we serve about 165 moms. And it's not that we're doing any medical counseling or anything like that. We're doing spiritual counseling. We walk with these moms for 18 months, full pregnancy in the first year of baby's life,
Mm-hmm.
where we are able to provide food for their family. So mom's not worried about where the the nutrition comes from. We're able to provide biblical counseling
Mm.
about how God is building or developing this baby inside of her, and what a picture of a godly family is, and how parents are to influence their kids and raise them up, and so we go through that full process. But what pregnancy does for us, it gives us access to the whole family, right? So as
Mm.
soon as we take care of mom and we help begin to solve mom's issues, we then can have conversations with dad, or with boyfriend, or with grandparents, or with other kids in the family. And so
Wow.
we begin to have influence feeding, then serving through pregnancy. All of a sudden, we have a conversation with the whole family. You
Wow.
start having conversations in a community of 3,000 people with 100 moms, 100 families. All of a sudden, you're having a conversation with the whole community, right?
Yes.
And they
Wow.
all go to different churches. I didn't invite them into my process and my end result. I invited them into the conversation, the discipling process along the way. And
Yes.
so as we did that, we discovered that the things in education that were missing were great, but the one that we began to solve was we could help educate kids through agriculture. And so we began to partner with the local school and provide some resources and tools where kids could expand their education, right? They had a meat processing plant, they had a dairy, but there were things that were lacking. And so we went in and identified the things that were missing in the meat processing plant for these kids to get a certificate, these kids to be educated. And what was missing was a raw material. They didn't have any meat,
Mm.
right? And so they would teach theory, they would show videos, they would go through the process, and then they would have the kids bring 2 kilos of pork out of their family diet to learn how to use the knives and the saws. And
Oh my gosh.
that's a terrible idea, because you're
Yeah.
defeating the issue of poverty at that point. I mean,
Yeah.
you're just creating more. And
Mhm.
so we launched a pig farm. We started growing pigs in this community. And so now every week we provide a pig to the school for their students and teachers to butcher. And so now there's about 235, 250 kids that are impacted on us every semester
Yeah.
because they have meat to actually process.
Wow.
And so we give the first 20% of the harvest, whatever's processed, back to the school to feed the kids. And then the kids package the rest of it. And we're able to disciple the kids into how to feed their family and the families of the other community. So from the inside of the education
Wow.
process, we are now teaching families how to serve other families in the community and
Mhm.
to have eyes to see what needs to be solved.
Mm.
And so look, man, we've just taken the gospel, we've just taken our lives, our demonstrated life with Christ into every aspect of what's called community
Mm.
through the family, and that's where the impact's coming
That's
from.
so good. And how much do you know about butchering pigs? Maybe you know
I
some now, but
never,
when that
no,
happened,
man,
how much
no,
you're
I
not a
didn't, I
butcher,
didn't,
right?
I'm not. I had grown up hunting, and so I had been able to clean an animal, but
Right.
I'd never butchered a pig.
Right.
But that's not
And
for
that's the
me,
point
right?
that you don't have to know
the
because you're
the
just
teachers
yes.
are the experts. I
Yes.
needed to find out what their barrier was and
Hmm.
equip them through their barrier.
Yes.
And I don't ever have to go back. I mean, I just have to maintain a relationship with them and
Yep.
make sure they're good.
Yes.
And they're teaching those kids. So I love on the teachers.
Yes.
I don't have to have a relationship with every kid, even though our employees are in and out of there, and they do.
Hmm.
Once they recognize you, then you start to have conversations in the grocery store. You have to start to have conversations at the soccer field.
Yeah.
Everything changes when you get
Yes.
down to equipping people to do it themselves.
Yes. That's so awesome. Yeah. My goodness. And some of the stuff we're talking about with the global strategy forum, and you're going to Thailand and speaking there. Tell me
Yeah,
about Eli loves your model, and we all do. And we're thinking bigger, like not just your
sure.
ministry, but what does this look like to be able to scale globally? Like, is it it sounds like this would be the way if I wanted to start a ministry anywhere, I would follow this model. But is this also something that if I'm already in a ministry that I could start to implement and see some massive changes?
Yeah. Um, I I truly believe so. but I think a lot of times, and it's been written um, in Jim Collins's book, Good to Great, right? Good is always better is always the enemy of best. You know, good
Mm,
is always enemy of great. There's many good ministries out there that are doing really good stuff, but we settle for good when we need to be
yeah.
operating at great.
Mm,
Um, and so, existing ministries to find the discipline and obedience to slow down enough,
mhm,
not to evaluate your programs, but to evaluate your relationships.
mm,
That's the hardest thing because how do we have enough margin to keep going with what we're going in and actually stop and develop the relationships that we skipped over that
yeah.
are now our limiting factors?
Mm,
That's the hardest thing with existing.
yeah.
It's also the hardest thing with new startups because most of the time people don't have the margin and the runway to walk slow enough to
Mm.
authentically develop a relationship.
Because this takes longer. Like I literally could go take a sports program into Costa Rica very quickly, but that's ignoring whether they even need it, want it, or there's people there that can run it for me.
Probably not going to be sustainable if you don't
Exactly.
build the runway, right?
Yeah.
And so here's the other piece of the story. So I
Mm,
told you I went to the church in 2010. So
mm-hmm,
my Costa Rican relationship started in 2010
mm,
by me taking in a relationship that was existing with the local church that I became a pastor at and starting to understand it. So from 2010 to 2018, I was just part of the mission system. We took
mm.
small groups down there. We were
Yeah.
able to invest in a local church. But all along, I was building relationships.
Yeah.
So when I stepped out of the local church
Yeah.
and went back into a country, I was able to leverage relationships that
Yes.
had been fostered for 8 years. So
Yes.
here we are in 2024, and I'm 14 years into a relationship that's
Mm,
giving me results of a 4-year-old organization.
amazing.
And so
Mm,
when we try to launch something new, we probably need to spend enough time in our planning and our process development to find pathways where we've walked before
mm,
and people we've walked with where trust is established so that we can move quicker.
that's good.
Because, man, we can run really fast and we can see some success, but the chance that it's sustainable
Mm,
is far smaller than if we work in environments where we have relationships of trust built.
that's good.
So if I were going into another country, for instance,
Mhm,
this is not part of this is a hypothetical, but if I were going into Honduras,
mhm.
right, I wouldn't go to a city and just go, okay, here's where we're going to replicate Beyond the Known International, right? I could tell you that poverty, education, and economics will probably, from my experience, be the same three factors. So I have a semblance of knowledge of what barriers would be there,
Mhm, mhm,
but nobody in that community trusts Craig because nobody knows Craig. So
mm,
I have to find somebody that I have a relationship with that
mhm.
can take me to the next level.
Yeah.
And I believe Global Strategy Forum and their ability to think on a global nature will provide pathways that
Mm,
help people like me get to where we need to go quicker. So if Global Strategy Forum has a relationship of I don't know what they call it, their ambassadors, their partners, their mega thinkers, if they have someone in Honduras that already has credibility and trust built
yes.
within local governments, local church networks, then
Yeah.
I'm able to come alongside and they actually can bring me as a trusted relationship to people that have trust and we
Yeah.
can move this along quicker. But we can't just go and launch a program without developing trust.
Mm,
It can't happen. Well,
mm.
in my mind, it can't happen, right?
Right.
There's people that
Yeah.
do it because they have economic resource or, but sustainable, I
Yeah.
don't know that it'll last. I don't
Wow.
know that it'll last.
My gosh. This is so good. Craig, thank you. Any other last tips for anybody that's wanting to start a ministry, a business, or just anything else on your heart?
I would just say this ministry, business, man, even your family,
Mm,
it, it doesn't start with a big plan. It starts with you
Hmm.
and your heart alignment to be obedient with what the Lord has for you to do.
Yeah.
He's gifted you, He's given you certain skills and abilities. That's where you have to start.
That's so
He's
good.
not wired you to do something that somebody else is doing. He's
Yeah.
wired you to do what you can do.
Yeah.
And so do self-discovery before you try to do big planning on other
Mhm.
things, because
Mhm.
if we're out of alignment, the favor of the Lord will not be there. And I believe the favor of the Lord is on our ministry because of the steps of obedience that happened early on.
Yeah.
And so I would just encourage people to slow down and start with some self-reflection.
Mm.
Um, and the Lord will give you exactly what you need to do.
Yes, He will.
His plans are greater than our plans.
Yes.
And when we recognize that, we will begin to flourish.
Mm. Amen. Love it. Thank you so much. You're welcome back anytime. You just let me
Yeah,
know.
Ryan. Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, and I look forward to what comes out of this
Amen.
opportunity in Bangkok with the
Yes.
Global Strategy Forum. I think something great is before
I
us, and
agree.
these are very important
Yes.
steps.
Love it.
So,
Thank you, sir.
all right, bud. Take care.